This entire program is brought to you by GatSulfur.com, where you can purchase the highest quality pure organic sulfur crystals. Make a difference in your life, and others will notice. Buy sulfur at GatSulfur.com.
The information presented on this program is not intended to take the place of your personal physician's advice and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Discuss this information with your own physician or healthcare provider to determine what is right for you. Welcome to Sanitas at sanitasradio.com, because your health and longevity should not be classified information. And now, here's your host, Mel Fabregas.
Greetings to everyone around the world, and a warm welcome to another edition of Sanitas. I'm your host, Mel Fabregas, and I sincerely thank you for joining me once again. Tonight, we have a very special and important interview. I think I've found a very important link missing from a healthy life, and that is sulfur. A few months ago, one of our listeners came to me and said, Mel, you're discussing a lot of great health material, but you have to discuss sulfur. And to be quite honest, I was not too familiar with organic sulfur. So you can learn more about it by going to www.gotsulfur.com. I looked into it and found the right person. Tonight's special guest is Patrick McGeehan, the man behind the Live Blood and Cellular Matrix study. You see, I've been in communication with Patrick for the past few weeks. And if I'm not laughing, because he has a great sense of humor, I'm learning something new. As you know, I love history. And in fact, Patrick's nickname used to be History, because he also loves history. So directly from Murray, Utah, I'd like to introduce Patrick McGeehan. Hello, Patrick, and welcome to Sanitas.
Mel, thank you very much for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And I said us because we're the Cellular Matrix study, and there's 280,000 of us's who refuse to die, who refuse to get worse, who refuse to be sick, and refuse to have bad attitudes.
This is all incredible because for the past, I would say, 25 years is when I've started into alternative health. And sulfur is one of those things that I was not familiar with, almost as if the mainstream media and even alternative media is not discussing that often. Why is that, Patrick?
Well, when they discovered what they'd done with chemical fertilizers in 1971, the petrochemical companies and the pharmaceutical companies got together and sort of agreed not to allow the word sulfur in any peer-reviewed journal. So by 1975, sulfur did not appear in any peer-reviewed journal. So it's hard for scientists. I mean, like Linus Pauling couldn't find that sulfur was the missing mineral because it wasn't in the literature.
That's right.
And Len Horowitz has a remarkable article about the CIA and the West Nile virus, and 3/4 of the way through it, you find out that someone got paid not to put the sulfur back.
So I think it's important also, and I want to take this in chronological order. I always say that a lot of my guests go through, 99% of the time, Patrick, they go through some traumatic experience that makes them look outside the box. So tell us about sulfur and the history of how it used to be part of our life, and all of a sudden in the late 1800s, something happened. Tell us, first of all, let's go from there.
Okay. The thing that promoted me, or sort of pushed me along to find out more about sulfur, was the fact that my son had been diagnosed with cancer to die for. And doctors who I had trained said, don't worry, he'll be dead before he's 21, next. And so I really didn't know what I was doing, but I figured I've got to figure out what's going on so I can keep this rotten kid alive. If he lives long enough, we'll become friends.
Yeah.
And an old man, Jay Farmer, 89 at the time, threw me a bag of sulfur and says, take this instead of those damn Tums. And I did. And, 20 years of gastroenteritis was gone. So I started really researching, and I couldn't find a damn thing about sulfur. Not one thing. And then I found little snippets here and little snippets there. And then the article that got my son taking sulfur was from the UK, and it was from a commercial journal of Lignosol from the UK. Mike Jones Pritchard found 28,000 women who didn't want to be cut, burned, and poisoned again, and all they did was take sulfur. And in 2000, they were all alive. None of them had succumbed to the cancer. None of them had their cancer advance. And none of them had killed their husbands.
Now, with your son's experience, how was it that you got into sulfur? How did you find it, and what did you tell the doctors after?
Well, the doctors didn't want to see him anymore. They said, go die. My son has not seen a doctor since 2001.
It's like
he was diagnosed in 1999, and they don't want to see him. He's just going to die. Why do they want to see him?
You know, I recently interviewed Dr. Harvey Bigelson, and the title of the show was "Doctors Are More Dangerous Than Germs." And, you know, there's some validity to that. Look at what happened with your son. And, you know, he's healthy, I presume, now?
Yeah, he's missing some parts, but he's quite healthy. He's actually got a wife. Wow. Actually has a job. You know, he's got a 2013 Mini Cooper. He's doing okay.
And as I said at the beginning of the show, you know, usually I conduct serious interviews, but it's also great to have humor. I think longevity has a lot to do with humor. And this is something that maybe people with lack of sulfur cannot enjoy. Would you say that's true?
Oh, yeah. You know, I tell bad jokes. We have a little radio show, and I tell bad jokes. And I know it's working when the people laugh at my bad jokes.
It's because they like you.
No, because their attitudes change. They're not being critical about everything. For instance, a parishioner goes into the confessional and she says, "Father, forgive me for I have sinned. I killed a politician." And the priest says, "I'm sorry. I'm here to hear your sins, not your community activities." You know, it's all about attitude.
That's right.
If you hate Muslims, that's your attitude. It has nothing to do with the Muslims.
Now, let's go back in time to 1860. You know, everybody has heard the name of the company, of the conglomerate, IG Farben. Now it's known as Bayer because, you know, the Nuremberg trial or tribunal dissolved IG Farben and turned it into Bayer. That was
why? And why did they do that?
Yeah.
Friedrich Bayer was the first guy to synthesize anything. First drug was aspirin. Maybe the deadliest drug on the market. Why is that? Because it'll kill 80 aspirin will kill an adult elephant. Now what are you going to do with a human? You know, the leading cause of suicide is still aspirin ingestion. Why do so many people take aspirin on a daily basis, supposedly just to prevent a heart attack? Because they are listening to a lie. The question is, why do people take aspirin? Because of pain. You know, they don't take. If you have a heart attack, it's painful. Or if you haven't had one, don't. And so everything that's related to pain, there's where it deadens the nerves. It doesn't do anything to address the pain. Sulfur, on the other hand, allows the nerve endings to repair, allows the myelin to repair. So people who have been on aspirin or opiates or anything of that sort in our study aren't anymore. We don't have any heroin addicts. We had, but we don't now. Now, let's continue talking about the history of how this happened. So here's Friedrich Bayer in 1827 who synthesizes aspirin. And before 1897, you could buy aspirin in any village in the land. And it really was a very, very successful marketing program. And it allowed the Germans to do World War I, aspirin, and allowed the Germans to do World War II, aspirin. Now, again, tell me, what's the link between the two wars and aspirin and Bayer? Profits, money. If you got enough money to make battleships and tanks, you will. Right, but what's the aspirin connection? All the money. That's the connection. It was a successful anti-pain drug, even though it killed people, and so it sold. And so Friedrich Bayer, who happened to be related to the Rockefellers, interesting, that's why that name carried over in the United States. And, there were a lot of other drug companies who were selling aspirin. Monsanto was an aspirin seller. Sterling was an aspirin seller. There's a book called The Aspirin Wars by Mann and Plummer, and if you want to figure out why it is we're in trouble, just read the book. It's a good book. It's a really good read.
By the way, I just made contact with Mr. Mann yesterday. He's outside of the country, but I thought that he was an elderly person. He's not.
Oh, no. They fired him when he and Plummer were kids. They wrote the book in honor of the company. They worked for this wonderful company, and they wrote this book, and as they wrote it, they found out it wasn't such an honorable company. By the time they finished it and published it, they got fired.
He wrote two bestsellers now, I hear, 1491 and 1493, talking about life in America before Columbus came here. So, for history buffs, I want to look into that too. But
I'm going to as well. My great-grandfather was the chief of the Cherokee who did not lead the Trail of Tears.
Interesting. And speaking of native tribes, many people criticize the natives around the world because they choose, they call them soulless savages, as you know, but they criticize them because they live so close in the foothills of volcanoes as if that's something bad. But in reality, when the volcano spews, volcanic sulfur, that falls into the ground, which gives nutrients to all the soil, and that's why they're healthy. Is that true?
Yes, I agree. It's except for the fact that the Hawaiian Islands have been decimated by Monsanto, they used to grow food for other islands. Now they don't even grow food for themselves. But
health-wise, in Hawaii, a lot of them are healthy because of what I just said. They have these volcanoes that are still active. They spew, ash every so often. Have you found a correlation between cities that are in close proximity to volcanoes and their health in comparison to others?
No, I mean that has. Remember, we don't go out looking for information. The information comes to us.
No.
And that really hasn't come into play. Directly behind me, about 7 degrees to the south, is an old volcano. Along the Wasatch Front, there's this old volcano. No one ever talks about it. Well, here I am photographing it almost every day. It's a volcanic caldera. And there's on 60 Minutes, they had a story on 90-plus people. We only have 14 90-year-olds in the study. We will not pay a head tax to get more, but if the 90-year-olds want to get near 100 or 120, I think they should join the study. One, we learn so much from them because they've got 9 decades of experience.
Let's go back to the history because I really want to look into the study that you're superbly conducting. But
okay, something we didn't mention. 1860, they started making chemical fertilizers. They only used the chemical fertilizers in Germany, but because of that, Alzheimer's and Warburg became very important, even though they didn't recognize the fertilizers.
And Alzheimer was a German.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. He found all these girls who were lost in their own mind, just downwind from the Ruhr Valley. And I talk to people who are in Pennsylvania who have suffer the same indignity of never had a vaccination.
So after 1860, how did it, because World War I...
In 1860, it was coal tar chemical fertilizer. In 1938, something that Len Horowitz brings up, they decided they would make the fertilizer out of petroleum.
Coal tar,
Yeah, hence the Rockefeller combination.
Right.
And, the reason that Len wrote the article was all of a sudden Ebola, West Nile virus, and AIDS cropped up in the West Nile region of Africa, 1938.
Wait a second. AIDS in the 1930s?
1938.
So there's documentation that AIDS was around in the 1930s?
Yes, there is. They didn't call it AIDS. It just depends on what name you put on it. If you've got smallpox, it's different than if you've got a wart on your nose.
Mm-hmm.
But your biology is still the same. And, so the Linus Pauling's comment at the BYU graduation in 1990 is really eloquent. All of our modern diseases are a result of a missing mineral that he couldn't find. It wasn't in the literature. Well, we couldn't find the literature either, but what we found is if you put sulfur back in the diet of man, One, they stopped complaining about their health because their health's improved. And two, they stopped cheating their neighbors. And three, they stopped fooling around with their neighbors' wives. It's a change of attitude. If you feel good, you stop being a jerk.
And all of this, do you think, is due to lack of oxygen? And do you think oxygen deficiency is the hidden cause of cancer?
Oh, well, Warburg proved it. I don't have to prove it. He proved it in 1931.
Was he the one who got 2 Nobel Peace Prizes unshared?
And stayed alive, a Jew in Nazi Germany.
Because they needed him.
No, he was Hitler's personal doctor.
There you go. They needed him.
Oh, yeah. Somehow he stayed out of the bunker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there aren't really any bad people. There really aren't. I love the old Boys Town movie. No boy is born bad, and he's not. But circumstances can make him really jaded. And when we see really jaded people start being concerned about someone else, now we're impressed.
So World War I, 1914, 1913, we got the Federal Reserve. All of a sudden, coincidentally, we get World War I. Yeah. Because all these companies wanted to all the banking, wanted to finance wars, both sides, plus all the chemical industry cropping up everywhere. Then we get World War II, the same thing happening there. But what happened in 1954?
In 1954, Ezra Taft Benson signed a rider to the Farm Subsidies Act of 1946 saying if you wanted to get paid for not growing anything, you had to use chemical fertilizers year-round.
Who was behind this?
Farmers had resisted in the United States since day one. They'd seen what had happened in the Dust Bowl. That was chemical fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. That's what caused the Dust Bowl. It had nothing to do with God.
So wait a second. What happened then? If the the Dust Bowl had that, we still have the chemical fertilizers. How come we're not seeing that now?
Because we're now using so much more chemicals, and we're using so much more water to produce less food.
Mm.
We're in a society where we go to the store and we buy a pepper, or we buy a grape, one grape, and then we go over and buy stuff in boxes. And, the thing I think is interesting about boxes is that they are sort of closely akin to coffins.
Yeah.
And if you eat something out of a box, that's where you're headed, ahead of time. It's not God's call if you've eaten preservatives. It's your call.
Well, you know why they call fast food, right?
Actually, I think fast foods are probably better than the stuff that comes in boxes.
Well, fast food because it takes you faster to the grave.
No. What I'm saying is, our demographics is the average age is 77, and some of our older folks are really very, very fond of a Wendy burger
or a cigarette. I know people who are in their 80s, and I've told them, hey, when are you going to quit smoking?
Stop telling them that.
That's right.
30% of our study members smoke.
30%?
30% of our study members smoke. And, what's important is, are you going to let the toxins get you down, or are you going to do something? If you're going to do this, what are you going to do to prevent it? And for someone who just refuses to do exercise, then you stand on the back porch and you pound your chest. It's Tarzan all over again, but it's remarkable. What it does is it frees up the crap that's in the areoli, and it comes out as sputum.
Well, isn't that what Qigong is all about? Just pounding yourself in the lymph nodes and excreting all the toxins?
You have to learn Chinese. That was a joke.
Well, you see, I told you. I have. Let me tell you something. I have my sulfur right here next to me with a spoon. I've already had my spoon in the morning, but I was getting ready. If I was not too quick-wit with you, I was ready to pause the mute button and put it in because I need to really be quick with you.
Wait till the commercial because it takes about 2 minutes to chew it.
Yeah.
And then when you try to talk, you spit sulfur all over the place.
No, I'll ask you an open-ended question and I'll put it in mute because we don't take any commercials. But,
okay.
People don't know this, but I started taking organic sulfur about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Because so many people said to me, you need to try it. And of course,
right.
Before I can endorse or recommend a product, I have to try it myself. And the first night, And again, I want to go back to the history because I'm a history buff and I want to know.
Well,
everybody needs to know.
You'll get us there.
Okay. But I did the very first night when I got the package, Patrick, I couldn't sleep. I really just could not sleep. It felt as if I remember one time, Patrick, I used to live in Mexico City years ago when NAFTA was being implemented. And Mexico City is really, really high above sea level. And then I traveled to the Caribbean, the next day, and I didn't sleep for 2 days. Why? Because my blood was used to the lack of oxygen. I needed to bring more blood. So in sea level, I was able to stay awake for a long time. That's the same feeling I got when I took sulfur the first night. The next day, my mental clarity, I experienced that more than I've ever experienced before. I would say clarity was the biggest, energy and clarity, those two things.
How can you know anything if you have no mental clarity?
Yeah.
The first time I heard, I think I mentioned this to you, the first time I heard about mental clarity was from a bunch of truckers on the Northern Corridor. 60-year-old guys who had found this job they could do until they died, driving from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and they're all talking about mental clarity, and I thought it was a joke. I thought they'd gotten together and they figured they'd play games with my head. No, these guys didn't even know each other. There's 5,000 drivers, we had 50. None of them knew each other, and they were all talking about mental clarity. And then one finally dropped the gun. He said, I made 20% more.
Now, how is that? Because they stopped less?
He made 20% more. He didn't run over geometros. He didn't miss exits. He didn't waste too much time at the stop. He made more money.
So basically, they stopped less to rest. Isn't there a requirement for them to rest after X number of hours?
No, you only get paid when you're on the road. You don't get paid anytime you stop.
Right, but aren't they required, like pilots, aren't they required to stop and sleep?
Oh, yeah, but these are guys who are 60-year-olds who are driving sort of illegally with bad books, and, that's they're making a living. That's all they're doing. It's pretty hard to regulate the trucking business because you put something in the back of the truck and you drive it across state lines. There are no border crossings between Portland, Maine, and Portland, Oregon. None.
That's right.
And it's just like with NAFTA. There's always ways to get around the rules if someone can profit. And, it was my understanding as a little kid that the reason we had profit was for the benefit of everybody, not just a few. Now, I know that must make me a Pollyanna and all that stuff, but I'm getting a chance to see it work. When you can see just real nasty Mr. Potter type bankers or people, from the movies turn into nice people who are concerned about other folks. Wow.
In your study, and by the way, your sound, the little buzzing sound is starting again. In your study, do you have anybody who has told you, look, I used to be angry all the time. I used to be mad all the time. Now the feeling of anger has dissipated. Have you had anybody tell you that?
One of the fellows who's on our show all the time, he's our New England study director, is an Italian. He's a former pilot. He's a Vietnam vet, and he hates blacks. Or should I say, he hated blacks. And while he was pulling out of the VA, some guy tried to pick a fight with him. And he didn't cooperate. Normally, he would have just cleaned house with the little guy and left him in the trunk. Does that answer your question?
Well, that's one person. Somebody might say...
but that's one person as an example, a specific example of a whole bunch of people. I've posted online, if Dick Cheney would take organic sulfur twice a day, he'd become a nice guy. I don't say that because Dick's called. I say that because we talk to girls who put Dick to shame. If you really want to run into a tough lady, give her cancer, and she'll become obnoxious. And if all the symptoms of the cancer goes away, my goodness, she becomes really interested in other people.
So is it safe to say that Rockefeller, if we had to just find the culprit here, was it Rockefeller who decided that he needed to increase his profits and control the world's usage of a fertilizer and then convince the farmers that the petrochemical fertilizers would enable them to spend more time farming instead of spreading, manure?
There really aren't many books written about J.D. Rockefeller. None of them are nice. And, I read a couple of things where J.D. Rockefeller not only hated his kids, he hated his grandkids. And he really didn't have any friends. He ate alone, but he was a brilliant man. You got to give him that. He figured it all out. Hey, if we turn everything synthetic and charge everybody for the synthetics we sell them, we'll get rich. And he did. Everything he touched turned to gold.
But did he know? Was this an unintended consequence, or did he know that the petrochemical fertilizers would kill all the sulfur in the soil, that the manure facilitated?
If you look at his effects upon the pharmaceutical industry and medicine and the funding of colleges, I have a funny feeling he did know.
He did know, and I bet
he did know that if you take the sulfur away, we can all get rich.
Not only that, but by taking the sulfur from the soil, you're depriving people from the essential nutrients, eventually causing illness and disease, and making a buck down the line with disease too.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? I mean, isn't that why people are around, so they can be sick, so we can get rich?
Well, that's what they tell us.
Well, and that's what they believe.
Right.
Okay, and, the interesting thing about sulfur, and this is maybe the most interesting thing that we hear back, we don't ask people what they take. It's none of our business. But they tell us what they don't take anymore.
But
what they don't take anymore is any of the advertised drugs of pharma. Now, how long is pharma going to last with that going on?
Well, I know sometimes doctors prescribe medication that when you mix them, it has a negative effect. Can sulfur have a negative effect with anything else that's somebody's taking?
We've really tried to kill everybody. It's not a joke.
I know, and you haven't been able to kill
and
anybody.
Everybody's taking everything. We don't tell them to stop taking anything. We just say, look, it's a food. Take it before everything else, and then later, 12 hours later, and then just see what happens. And see what happens is what happens when you wake up in the morning. Are you depressed and you feel like you want to kill your neighbors and you hate everybody of color, or do you wake up and you really are greeting a new day?
And I'm glad you clarified. Sulfur is not a drug or a supplement or a vitamin. It's a food.
Pardon, Mel?
I'm saying that I'm glad you clarified because many people are thinking, is this a drug? Is this a supplement? And it's neither. It's a food.
Yeah, it's a food. It's a crystal food, but we think sugar's a crystal food. That's just crystal poison. This is derived from marine pine trees, and the nature of the source of it is really just Louisiana pine trees. It's the only food-grade MSM or organic sulfur in the world. Now, it doesn't mean it's made here because no one here knows how to make it.
So this
Why
is where
don't they know
sulfur.
how to make it?
This is where it comes from.
Pardon?
This is where sulfur comes from.
Yeah, marine pine trees. The pulp of marine pine trees. Pycnogenol comes from the bark of marine pine trees. We've known about, talking about history, I'm sorry, the first record I can find of paper water, i.e. organic sulfur, is from the 10th century in China, when the rice famine forced the Chinese to find something else other than rice for the emperor to paint on.
And how did they find the sulfur?
They tried everything, and then what they found is that wood pulp pulverized in a water trough makes great paper. It also makes the hands of the aged paper workers as soft as little children. So this enlightened emperor had all of his concubines bathe in the paper water so their skin would be softer to his lascivious touch. And the same thing happened in 46. Richard Herschler went to Portland, Oregon to find out whether the state of Oregon wouldn't let them dump the dimethyl sulfoxide in the river anymore. And the result was, give it to me and I'll get rid of it. That was the beginning of the MSM business in the United States, 1946.
But MSM is good. Was then. If they would have dumped it in the river or in our water supply, just like they do with fluoride, and they want to do with lithium, and they want to do with, what else do we have in the water? We have cancer.
We don't care.
We have cancer medication that people, excrete.
But we don't care because what we're harvesting is the crystal. And all the other crap goes with the water. You know,
Now,
there's less than 1.1% of water in the sulfur. So it doesn't matter what the water was, it's not there anymore. And all you're looking at is a crystal that's formed by a fiber, natural fiber from the pulp, and the sulfur, which is what held the pulp together. And, you know, the great benefit to us is it's the world's best oxygen transporter.
And I keep going back to I don't mean to interrupt you, Patrick, but
that's your job. I understand that.
I keep going back to cancer. And it seems that, you know, when I look at the statistics, 1900, only 3% of the population died of cancer. But today, everyone listening, you and I know someone who's afflicted by it. Is there a connection here between what used to be in our soil, the transport mechanism? We have a couple. What is it? Is it selenium and something else, and sulfur that carry the oxygen into our cells?
There's only three. There's sulfur, selenium, and tellurium.
And tellurium.
Colorado is named after tellurium. And I lived in Telluride for a while, and between 1888 and 1978, not one case of cancer was reported in Telluride, Colorado. Not one. The tellurium was in the air.
Now, how does it get in the air?
They were mining silver. You know, and since that time, since 1978, cancer is very prevalent in Telluride. They have 3 oncology clinics in a ski town. How about that?
Well, you know where I live. This is Tucson, Arizona. I mean, we have an oncology center in every corner. We have, you know, by the year 2050, more than 50% of the population will be elderly. So think about that.
Hey, Mel, watch your tongue. God.
No disrespect. You know what? Because I will be one of them.
God, you know, our average age is 77 years old. Do you want to be stormed? Do you want all these girls to come down and just kick your butt down in Arizona?
Well, that's why I'm listening to you, so that when 2050 comes along, I'm still doing the same activities I do now.
Or more.
Or more.
Well, you know, I don't know what your medical history is, so I don't, you know, but what impresses me are people who haven't used parts of their body for a long, long, long time, and now they are. You know, we've got a guy named Michael J. Fox who's funny, and the funniest part about him is now he has a disease that makes him funnier. Well, the disease is a neurodegenerative disease, and if you allow your cells to regenerate, that neurodegenerative disease goes away.
Now, I'm so glad you mentioned Michael J. Fox, because I've discussed him before, and I strongly believe, and I hardly use the word believe, I strongly think that he got Parkinson's because since he was the spokesperson for Diet Pepsi, according to Dr. Betty Martini.
Yeah, and Betty Martini would agree with you. But you know, when I first talked to Betty, I said, Betty, I don't want to ruin your week or anything, but sulfur allows you to recover from the formaldehyde of aspartame. It's a scar. It allows you to regenerate those cells. They're no longer scarred down. Your nerves work again.
My wife knows this man, a friend of hers. He's probably about 49 or 50. He has Parkinson's. And she asked me, do you think you'll be able to find something to help him? I'm asking you, can sulfur help him?
Yeah, of course it'll help him. Now, you know, he has it. Is the question. What did he do? What happened in life that caused him to just wreak havoc on his neurological system?
You think for being so young, he must have had, I don't know the history, but maybe he drank too much Diet Pepsi?
He's probably suffering the same, at 86 degrees, aspartame turns into formaldehyde.
That's right.
And I went to school with 6 families of morticians in my high school.
Yeah.
And so, I've had a chance to talk to morticians over the years, and what they say now is they don't have to use as much formaldehyde. These folks are already embalmed.
I don't mean to laugh, but yes. But, I've told this story to people that, and I'm stopping, folks. I really don't go out there to social gatherings and tell people what to drink or what to eat. They do it on their own. But if I have a good friend and I see them drinking a diet product, I tell them, hey, look, you understand that, 86 degrees, this turns into formaldehyde. And you know what they tell me? But Mel, touch the can. It's about, 40 degrees, 50 degrees. And they don't
What's the
realize it's going to get into their
body melt?
gut. Exactly. It's going to get into 98.6 once it hits their stomach.
That's the way it's going to happen. And but the thing that I say to these guys, especially I have a nice watch, he said, well, when you die, can I have your watch?
Yeah.
Sometimes a little offhanded humor gets the point across.
Yes.
And I try not to tell anybody to do anything. I really don't. And if they're doing something dumb, what we found is that the sulfur sort of makes it so you understand you're doing something dumb.
Yeah.
And the folks that I found at McDonald's, they stopped going to McDonald's. But the first thing they stopped doing was the big 64-ounce Diet Cokes. That was the first thing they did. So if sulfur makes girls beautiful, no matter their age, and men less stupid, we can push that over to the edge so we are also saying women less stupid, but that's not nice.
Oh, folks, we don't mean any disrespect with the humor.
No, it's what we want are people to be able to look in the mirror and say, oh, I really am beautiful. I mean, those are calls I get. And these girls are not young. They're 80, 88, 85, 87. And if they can see it in the mirror, my goodness, it's why, why are they seeing in the mirror? Because their friends are asking, why do you have a glow?
That's right. Let me go.
I'm allowed into nursing homes. They let me in. Idiots. And, you can make eye contact with someone who isn't there, and you make no eye contact. There's no one there. But when son or daughter can get these people taking sulfur, guess what comes back? The eye contact. That's how our autistic kids come back, the eye contact. It's how we communicate. Patrick Flanagan is on our show and developed a thing called a neurophone so they could talk to, porpoises so they could find out where the Russian fleet was. Well, it's all about eye contact. Even while wearing a neurophone, he was able to communicate with dolphins through eye contact.
What is that they say? The eyes are the window to the soul?
Well, and I'm sorry, the eagle is the eyes of the Great Spirit. If you guys don't stop killing the eagles, we're going to tear down your damn windmills.
Now, going back to cancer for a moment, it's a multi-billion dollar, dare I say multi-trillion dollar industry, the second most powerful business in the world after petrochemicals. With all these nonprofit organizations, cancer charities, you name it, Run for the Cure, billions of dollars collected, and nothing happens. Are they looking in the wrong place for a cure, or are they just pretending that they're not finding it?
Well, no. Well, come on. All you have to do is ask, like the head of the Psoriasis Foundation gets $750,000 a year, and yet no one is cured of psoriasis, and yet our STEM members don't have psoriasis and can't spell it anymore. And I never wanted to make $750,000 a year. What a tax headache! Whoa.
Well, that CEO that makes $750,000
and does absolutely nothing.
Would he or she really want to give up that position if they find the cure?
Oh, no.
There you have it.
The thing that irritates me about people like Autism Speaks, they really have no intention of getting anybody fixed. They just like the paycheck.
Yeah.
And, I've got no problem with that, but we come for the kids. We found the Pied Piper. We waterboarded him. We got him to spill his guts, and we're going to get him to bring all the kids back. You don't pick on mothers and children to make your money. Not on my watch.
And I think that a lot of the prescription drugs that a lot of pregnant women take, they have no idea what can happen later. I mean, I just read an article the other day that SSRI drugs are causing a lot of the autism. The women who are taking them, antidepressant medication during pregnancy, all of a sudden they wonder whether their children are, being born with autism. I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but there must be a connection.
Yeah. Autism and Alzheimer's are heavy metal in the blood-brain barrier. Rudy Tanzi proved it in 1992. Nobel Prize. And Rudy hates it when I call him.
Why?
Well, because I ask him questions he can't answer. I'm a medical photographer. I don't have a degree in anything except art and art history.
Now, I didn't ask you about your bio. I didn't talk about your bio. Can you just tell the audience a little bit of your background?
In 1945, my biological mother and my biological father were in a DC-3 going from France to England so that they could return to the United States. And the navigator of that plane said it got really quiet, and I think I was conceived at that time, somewhere over France. Mm-hmm. And then they ended the war when I was born, and and the rest of it is pretty much history until they wanted to draft me and send me out to kill people for them, Mel and Doug. And I said, oh no, I am a conscientious objector. And they said, you can't be, you're a Catholic. I was the first Catholic conscientious objector in the history of the United States. And when I started work at the hospital, my 2-year stint turned into 7 years, and then when they offered me a free ride to medical school, my comment was, you guys just haven't been listening, have you? And I left. I took up hang gliding. I've crashed more hang gliders than any other person in the United States, and still live to talk about it.
Now, why didn't you pursue medical school if you had a free ride?
Because 700 doctors had never listened to me. Why would they listen to me if I was a doctor? I was a photographer. I was taking pictures of the pathology. I wasn't making theoretical statements about it. I was taking pictures of the pathology. I sort of understood what the cell structure was. I saw what was going on, even though I didn't know what was going on. But I'd have to go down to the cancer clinics and photograph cancer cells through the microscope, and I'd have them explain what I was looking at, because here was a bunch of cells. So I had to learn. It's the school of hard knocks. And, I guess I learned something. They offered me a free ride. But they didn't offer me a free ride to change the system. They offered me a free ride to shut me up.
To shut you up and give you their toolbox.
Exactly. And so I left medicine until my son was diagnosed with cancer. And here are these guys I had trained telling me he ain't going to make it, no matter what anybody does. You never tell an Irishman that.
Did you have any contact with that doctor after your son was cured?
80 of them? There were 80 of them that said that.
80 of them?
No, 80. It was an oncology grand rounds. And the 80, all of them said he wouldn't make it.
So I'm saying, did you have communication with them after your son was cured?
No, he hasn't been back to a doctor since he started taking sulfur.
I just wonder what they would say. Because, they're told that it's impossible.
I'm sorry, Mel. Do I care?
Yeah, I know.
No, I don't. We didn't come to retrain the doctors. We came to retrain the patients. If you make them all healthy, the doctors are going to drive old Chevrolets, not Ferraris, not Mercedes. People who are still going back and seeing their doctor, and I said, well, ask your doctor, what color is your new car? And one lady called me back. She said, oh, he was so ecstatic. She said, did you see my new red Mercedes in the parking lot?
Yeah. So they'll never mention the word cure.
Oh, no. And, there is no thing in biology that talks about cure. It's biology. It's correct biology or it's unhealthy biology. You're either healthy or you're not.
The name escapes me, but who was the person who said that every single disease can be matched to a deficiency in a mineral? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Linus Pauling.
There you go. Linus Pauling.
And it was at BYU in Utah in 1990. Mm-hmm. Because the Linus Pauling Institute said, oh, he never said that. And I said, really? I love it when they say, oh, yeah, he didn't say that. Yeah, he did. One of my friends, who's the dean of the law school, he was there. He heard him. It's like the issue with Andy Wakefield in Austin, Texas. On Patrick Timpany's show, there's a guy, I think his name was Spielberg, saying, Wakefield is a fraud. No, he's not. He's an epidemiologist. How can you be a fraud if you're an epidemiologist? Closest thing to biology and medicine is an epidemiologist. So here are all these kids in Great Britain who have autism that he's seen, and by photographs he can see that they're no longer autistic. And he can be our director in England right from Austin, Texas. When people of great knowledge lie through their teeth to the detriment of a doctor or a child or a mother, I take umbrage at that.
Don't we all?
Evidently we don't. And because we let fear drive us, I've got to go see the doctor because I just don't feel good. Well, why don't you feel good? What have you been doing?
Yeah, instead of always putting a Band-Aid on things. Shouldn't we find the source? And I don't think, look, as I've always said, if I'm hit by a truck, take me to the hospital. If it's a traumatic like that, trauma, take me. But if it's chronic, I'll try to find something else.
When I don't know where Arizona is on medical marijuana, but we have a whole bunch of California and Colorado medical marijuana cardholders who don't go to buy pot for pain anymore.
Because they're using sulfur?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, you can, you're not impaired when you're driving when you take sulfur if you got pain. But it's interesting, the pain impairs your driving. We're driven by pain. That's why aspirin was so popular. It was because finally something to the Aztec nations in South America, the Germans in Upper Slavonia or whatever, to the Laplanders, you could buy aspirin for pain. Wow. Of course, it was synthetic, and so it sort of broke down all of your cells, but who cares?
Your liver.
Oh, yeah. The biggest problem with aspirin is, though, in the arterioles.
But isn't it a blood thinner?
Well, it's a blood thinner, but it irritates and ulcerates the walls of the arterioles.
I heard that pasteurized milk products, do the same thing.
Not to the same effectiveness. You can give an elephant 80 gallons of milk and it won't kill him, but 80 aspirin tablets will kill an adult elephant. And don't go out and try to prove it. We'll find you, and we'll take your fingernails and your toenails out one at a time with pliers.
So what happens if somebody takes too much? Is there too much organic sulfur?
Thanks to the work of Stanley Jacobs at Oregon Health Sciences, who gave half a pound, 200 grams, to death row inmates, and all they got was pasty poop. And they discovered that this was a problem because the amount of toilet paper used by these death row inmates skyrocketed.
You have your microphone, the buzzing sound?
I hope not.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. So, so we've tried to kill everybody. The people who had AIDS who first contacted us. My first article was How to Stop the Syndrome of AIDS with 100 grams of sulfur a day. Well, some of those guys took a pound a day. Still didn't hurt them.
So the effect is
They're
more or less
still
like...
alive.
So if you take too much magnesium, for example, all you get is, as you said, soft stool or diarrhea at the most. And diarrhea with sulfur probably would be because you're getting rid of the toxins too fast?
No, sulfur can't cause diarrhea. We don't know why. We just know it can't.
It cannot, okay.
No, because 60% of it is fiber.
Okay.
And if you want to slow down the stool, well, fill it up with fiber. And, every person says, oh, it gave me diarrhea. I said, no, it didn't. What did you eat? I've talked to 1 million people about this stuff. We have 280,000 of them who are still alive that we've all tried to kill. And from them, we learn really interesting stuff. When people's vision improves when they're 80, I'm sorry, it gets their attention. And they call.
You mentioned the society ruled by fear. I have to 100% agree with you. And we also have a belief system. And it's almost as if everybody's programmed. We have a belief system that tells us that as we get older, our cells degenerate until, we die. It's a downward spiral from, there's no return. That it cannot be reversed, or so we're told. But what is your study telling you?
That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie. When I was a boy, I remember the son of the chief of the Cherokee who didn't lead the Trail of Tears. And this was a 6'8" half-breed Cherokee, named George Armstrong Seiler. And he had 2 Clydesdale horses. And those horses did one thing all year round, pull tractors out of the mud. That's all they did. And they could. And, one day when he was 88 and doing all this pulling it out of the mud, they pulled the tractor right over him and killed him. Otherwise, he'd still be alive today. I mean, this was an 88-year-old man who could bend nails with his thumb. He wasn't dying. He got run over by a tractor pulled by his own horses. this myth that we just fall apart. No, we don't regenerate. If you don't regenerate your cells, then you will die. If you regenerate your cells and join the study, dying is not an option.
And I think it was Picasso who was still having children when he was in his 90s?
He was so nasty. But, we've got people not having, the people of the Hunzas in the Himalayas, when Flanagan was researching them, they were having kids when they were 100. Now, that's not hard for a man, but it's pretty hard for a woman. Man can, if you can make semen, you can make semen. Whoopee. My grandfather was 86 when my uncle was sired.
How old was the wife?
The surprise was to my grandmother.
Right. How old was she?
52.
Okay.
The Irish do that. There's a 20, 30-year spread between the man and the woman. Why? Because the man's drunk until he gets to be that age.
Oh, jeez. What can sulfur replace, Patrick, as it relates to synthetic pharmaceutical drugs?
That's an interesting question. All the advertised drugs, we know that. In one particular case, 82-year-old woman, insulin. After 3 years of insulin, she's no longer on insulin. And, the surprise was to her doctor. He's still asking questions about it, but he's not asking the questions of me. He's just asking him. And, it's the most impressive non-age-related thing are antidepressants. We just don't have anybody depressed. And, that's one of the first thing that goes is the antidepressants. They were sort of a bad thing in the first place, and Anne Blake Tracy, campaigned so they weren't given to children, and yet the doctors still give them to the kids. So all of those drugs, high blood pressure medications, our 80-year-olds taught us that if you put a quarter teaspoon of pink salt under your tongue 30 minutes after the sulfur, you're no longer on any high blood pressure medication. You're no longer on any statins.
Okay, say that again.
High blood pressure medication and statins are discontinued when your numbers change. All of a sudden your numbers change. Blood is more than just water and red blood cells. It's what we make in our lymph that goes into our bloodstream.
Well, cholesterol is
a certain thing, and it does it really well, and then the blood cells die, and we do it all over again.
Cholesterol is a myth. Anybody who wants to listen to I've done a few shows on this.
Oh, no. Cholesterol is a brain food. You already mentioned the mental clarity.
Yeah.
If Hal Huggins says if you get the mercury out of your bones and put it someplace else, you still got mercury toxicity.
Yeah.
Well, you want the cholesterol in your blood cells, your blood vessel cells, and in your brain. It's brain food.
Well, it's been proven. If you give people statins, their IQ goes down.
Oh, yeah. The problem is, and it happened while I was at the medical center, they developed a test to test cholesterol. 1975.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they started making anti-cholesterol drugs, when they had a test to test cholesterol.
So they demonized cholesterol from then.
Oh, yeah, but I'm sorry, your capillaries, your arterioles cannot regenerate without cholesterol. Your brain cannot assimilate anything without cholesterol. It's brain food.
I remember years ago, I bought an insurance policy, and my cholesterol, was high. And it was declined, and I had to work really hard. I took some statins, I took some red yeast rice, and then I noticed going to the gym that my muscles were not developing as they should. Oh,
I love it when you can't walk anymore.
That's right.
Stephanie Seneff is a PhD, that's Seneff, is a PhD from MIT, and she's married to a younger Japanese man. And she loves to go on 10-mile hikes, and he couldn't go on the hikes anymore after they put him on statins.
Mm-hmm.
So she started researching it, and there's an hour and 20-minute interview on Mercola with Dr. Seneff, and it doesn't have a nice thing to say about statins at all.
Yeah, it weakens your your muscles. I remember my conversation with Gwen Olson. She told me, what are the kidneys? What's the heart? It weakens your muscles. So, people die of, say, they die of a heart attack and they were taking cholesterol lowering medication. And people say, well, Patrick or Mel, they had high cholesterol when they died of a heart attack because the statin drug weakened the heart.
If it doesn't allow the capillary network of the heart vessels to regenerate, yes, it does.
Right.
And that's the mechanism, and that's what Stephanie Seneff has demonstrated. She's also a big advocate of anti-glyphosate. Agent Orange.
Yeah, GMO.
Yeah, and it's I don't know that it had anything to do with her dragging her into the fray, but this is a woman who is, no matter all the time that she's had at the Ivory Towers, and she started as a secretary and earned 3 PhDs, she's now fitting it all together. And, we could use a little support from the Ivory Towers. We outnumber them. We can probably get everyone to listen in the first place. But some of us are just so hell-bent for leather on only believing what the experts say.
Well, speaking of cholesterol, that opened another revenue stream, Viagra.
Oh, no one in our study buys Viagra, and the girls, the wives of the men are the ones who tell us, I don't buy him Viagra anymore.
Wow.
Sulfur works fine. I mean, on Timpani's show, there's a lot of jokes about hardwood.
Yes.
Old guys calls, hey, got this hardwood, just thought I'd let you know. God.
It all seems to be going to the same place, Patrick. Oxygen. All these diseases that all of a sudden have creeped up in the past few decades is oxygen. And there are only 2 ways that you can bring oxygen to your body. It's breathing, and what's the next one? Sulfur?
You're going to have to repeat that question. You broke up.
Okay, I'm just saying that there are only 2 ways that you can bring sulfur to your body. One is breathing, and the other one is via sulfur. Is that correct?
No. It's breathing. That's the air that drives the engine. The oxygen that allows you to regenerate your cells is what you drink. Water. That's why we're looking for water in space. Nothing works without water. And our bodies don't work without water. The sulfur is just a transporter. It's not a miracle or anything. It just transports oxygen and takes out the trash. Takes out the trash of the anabolic steroids from the guys who've been lifting weights all their life and now they can't move. Takes that trash out.
But what is water? What's the best water in your opinion? Because I hear people saying alkaline water is the best. Then I hear other people saying distilled water is the best. But isn't that dead water without any minerals?
Well, being that we only study sulfur, we don't know. But in 45 different countries, including Saudi Arabia and Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa and Paraguay, hot water works fine. There's no chlorine in hot water.
Yeah, but what about the rest of isn't water the vehicle to bring the sulfur, to help the sulfur bring the oxygen into the cells? Don't you need good water?
No. You have to have water that doesn't have something that will block the uptake or the ability of the sulfur to uptake the oxygen.
Such as?
Chlorine. Chlorine will do that, yeah. So the one thing that is not in any tap water in the world that's coming out of a hot water tap is chlorine. That's what ruins a hot water heater. The rocks.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have people, this all happened because we were talking to people who really didn't have the ability to go out and buy a Kangen water machine or a distiller or something of that sort.
Right.
So we suggested they use the hot water. The hot water worked just fine. Even hot water that's directly out of the Ganges, and the only thing it does is go into a hot water heater. That's the only thing that happens to it. It works great. That young man is no longer autistic, and Mom is getting prettier every day.
We have to take a one and only intermission to break the 2 segments apart. But when we come back, I really want to dive into the benefits of organic sulfur. And also, if you can, share some of the testimonials from your study. You've been doing this study for how long now?
15 years.
15 years. I want you to discuss a lot of the testimonials, the before and after. But, this is so simple. All you have to do is go to gotsulfur.com. And I've been doing it for 3 weeks only. And believe me, I've tried a lot of vitamins, supplements. I'm always adventurous in discovering new things. And this is one of those things, food. And that's why, I'm so happy to talk about this, because we discuss other things, and I'm always wondering, is the FDA listening? Are they going to come and do something? Are they going to stop me from talking about it because of claims? But this is a food.
Yeah, we don't make any claims. We just tell people what our study members have experienced. Now, if those are claims, I guess we'll just have to give them those study members' names, and they can go and shoot them. When I started the study, I had a little bit of experience. I had worked at the medical centers for 7 years. I saw what the clowns did for studies. I found out how's the best way to ruin a study. Keep it simple, stupid, is how you make a study work.
That's right. Well, folks, don't go anywhere. I'm here with Patrick McGeehan discussing sulfur. And remember, if you want to purchase this very, very important mineral element, just go to gotsulfur.com, which is also linked on our website. This is Mel Fabregas, and you're listening to Sanitas. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Sanitas. This is Mel Fabregas, and I'm here with my very special guest, Patrick McGeehan, discussing organic sulfur and how important it is and why it is that we don't see it mentioned anywhere. I mean, we don't like to talk about conspiracies on this radio program, but this is a conspiracy on its own. Is it a conspiracy, Patrick, that we don't see sulfur mentioned anywhere?
I think I'd have to say that. And the reason that I would have to say that is Len Horowitz's article, The CIA and the West Nile Virus. Otherwise, I really wouldn't want to think that people were that nasty and ornery. That they would gleefully kill people off when, I always thought the governments were supposed to do protect and serve or something like that.
Yeah.
But, I think from his article, it really is a justified situation to say, oh, yeah, they sort of did that on purpose. And they did it for money.
Speaking of Len Horowitz, I haven't heard of him or from him in a long time.
Are you familiar with the old National Lampoon, The Lemmings?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that Len has run off with a Yeti somewhere in Sandpoint.
So he's no longer in Orange County?
No, he's a couple of years ago, even though I didn't run into him, I knew he was in Sandpoint. People were talking about him.
By the way, I have a quote here that I was going to leave until the end, but I think it's appropriate to say it now. This quote, "If you are trapped in a cage of turmoil and illness, the door to healing always opens from the inside." Do you agree with that?
Of course. Now, and I'll try to make sense out of that by making nonsense out of it. Do you recall the night that your mom and dad got frisky and made you? Do you recall that night?
No,
okay,
and I wouldn't want to recall it even if I had the ability to do so.
It's right. It's a matter of privacy. Okay, and so, but from that point on, your body's making every cell within it. It's not making your environment without, it's making every cell within your body. The cells of your skin, the cells of your intestines, the cells of your heart, the cells of your eyes, and they're always regenerating until they can't. And that's where sulfur comes into the program. I was sort of studied some of the things about ophthalmology, and it's interesting that, the nature, glasses have been around for a long time. And, and Ben Franklin even developed the bifocal, made the Germans really jealous. But how our eyes reacted was dissimilar. We sure see people got cataracts from, traumatic cataracts, but they didn't get cataracts. They didn't get glaucoma, except from traumatic stuff. And the traumatic stuff is you cannot regenerate your cells. You've formed a scar tissue. So the test for our sulfur is it has to make scars go away. And because of that, we warn people with tattoos because it makes the tattoos go away too.
Now explain that if you have some scars right now after years, can the scars get better, or in other words, can the scarring reverse if you take sulfur?
Well, you're regenerating the cells. You're breaking down the scar tissue. You're breaking down the collagen of the scar tissue, and you're using it for whatever you want to use it for, and you're allowing new cells to regenerate. And I guess the best example are some of the girls who are kind enough to tell us that they had cesarean sections so they could wear bikinis later in life.
Yeah.
But what they found out was the scar tissue under the cut line from the cesarean section sort of made their bikini line bump out. And so their bikini lines don't bump out anymore. It's a scar is, can you feel the scar? Got a scar on your head? Oh, can you feel the scar? Got a scar in your gut? Can you feel the scar? Like the lady who told me she had a ovarian cyst. I said, how can you tell? She said, I can feel it. God.
Yeah.
I can feel it. Okay, I believe you. All of those things, all those problems happen from within, and we can correct them from within. And the only thing we have to do that is put something in our mouth that makes sense.
I think of eggs when they get rotten, we smell the sulfur. I think of gas, when you have a gas leak, you smell of sulfur. What's the correlation here?
You're actually smelling benzene on a gas leak. But see, that's mineral sulfur. But on the egg, it's just letting the methylation cycle tear into the egg, and now you got the smell because you're making sulfur dioxide. When sulfur enters the body as sulfur, it will combine and get crazy with everything, but it sort of hooks up with the oxygen, and it breaks a really hard bond between water, hydrogen, and oxygen. And, how it can break that bond and not make another bond and only transport the oxygen to the cell where it needs to be and then enable the oxygen to go in. Because the oxygen's a really big deal. If you've ever had a fat girlfriend, I'm sorry, oxygen's a lot bigger than that. Stephanie Seneff's article says, could sulfur deficiency be a contributing factor in obesity? That's more than 100 pounds. Second item, heart disease. Third item, Alzheimer's. Fourth item, Crohn's disease.
Crohn's?
Fifth item.
Crohn's too,
yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And fifth was fibromyalgia, and then chronic fatigue, and finally, wasting disease. You asked if the government was going to do anything, and I've got a 4-inch propeller plane going over my head. Hang on, I got to look at this.
I was going to say, do you have an F-15?
No, it's not. It's one of those huge, monstrous helicopters that picks up planets and moves them.
Okay.
You asked if I was. I'm not worried. I just wanted to see.
So you have a helicopter hovering over you now, huh?
It's good in the movies, but it really doesn't happen in real life.
What, the hovering helicopter?
No, the fear of it.
Oh, the fear of it. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. If they want to do that, they can, I guess.
Because I've had that happen to me. I'm not in fear, but it happens.
But what on Armed Forces Day or something, and I've never been to Vietnam, but I'm a Vietnam vet. And here's this Huey about 50 clicks off the ground with a side gunner when the machine gun's sticking out the door, and I'm going, holy crap, what's going on? Just to the northeast of us is Fort Douglas.
Yeah.
Just to the southwest of us is Fort Williams, Camp Williams. And, but I'm sorry, you just don't see somebody with a 50 caliber machine gun, hanging out the side of a Huey 50 clicks off the ground.
Now, you know what? Going back to sulfur for a second, I'm thinking, I'm not a doctor, but, our body is equipped with homeostasis, that finding the balance of the pH and all the things that the body needs to do in order to survive. But it seems to me, Patrick, that oxygen is the key here, because without oxygen, then the body thinks that it's dying. And without oxygen, the cells will eventually die. Is this what's happening to people with cancer and all sorts of, cellular degeneration? That their intake of oxygen is not there, and that's why they start dying, and as the cells start dying.
Historically, the leading cause of death is dehydration, and that's where the oxygen is that keeps us going. It's not the oxygen we breathe. The oxygen we breathe just drives the machine. But the oxygen we drink regenerates the machine, allows new cells to be regenerated. And I don't care how old you are. As long as you're still breathing, we got you covered. Is that a claim? No, it's not a claim. That's what we've observed. We haven't been able to kill anybody off, and our oldest member is 103, and she drives in Hawaii. And she's looking for a boyfriend.
And how old is she?
103. She's been widowed for 43 years and has not been with another man since. She's looking for a boyfriend. It's if you think you're old, then you're old.
Give us it's a matter of perception and belief. If you think your dad died at the age of 40 from this and that, and you believe that you're going to die, you're going to die.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the amazing stuff. The most amazing stuff, I guess, was I ran into a guy who he's dead now, because he stopped taking sulfur, but he makes PAV, pitch and Vaseline, and it's a product I would investigate. It's natrhealth.com. I won't leave the house without it. If it's not in my pocket, I won't leave the house. It's organic sulfur in a topical form. Okay, so we lost the wife of this guy, but we gained him as a friend, as a confidant, and until he really got too close to the doctors, at the age of 90, he was doing fine, and then the doctors got involved, and all of a sudden he was quite dead. This is a guy who taught me so much, because he knew sulfur because of the pine pitch. And we would tangle. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm a hardcore Baptist, and it was good fun. But it was always toward the trees, and was always towards the pine pitch. And then comes along this you can hear this mom and her daughter on one radio network, Tammy and Sophie. Tammy calls and doesn't say a thing about having an autistic child, but she's nursing a baby and wants to know if she can take the sulfur. And I said, of course you can. All the literature says you can't, but our moms say, yes, you can. So 3 days later, Sophie wakes Mommy up. Good morning, Mommy. First words, first sentence, first anything in a year since she was vaccinated. That's something you can listen on one radio network. 2nd of May, 2014. And then we ran into the folks who had end-stage cancer because of my son.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a number of people who were taking sulfur who had end-stage cancer and going through chemotherapy at the same time he was going through chemotherapy, and he wouldn't take it. They did. Okay, and to a man and a woman, they're still alive. End-stage means die tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're all alive. And we're not trying to prove anything. We're just trying to find out what sulfur can do. So far, we're impressed. And we think that if enough people take the sulfur and stop being jerks, we'll stop making war.
Do you think that a lot of this warlike mentality, well, of course, we can go back thousands of years. We've been fighting, humans have been fighting forever. But in the past 100 years, do you think a lot of this warlike attitude and people who are mad and angry, it's because the lack of oxygen in our system because of lack of sulfur? Okay,
you're a history buff. Imagine this. Eric the Red. Why did he do all that bad stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Had a boil on his ass. if you've got something that irritates your life, you will irritate the lives of other people.
Right.
Genghis Khan, he had an infection in his testicles. You ride a horse with an infection in your testicles, see how ornery you get. You'll kill everybody off. We are biological creatures in a hive of humans, and it's our job to figure out how to get along, but instead it's much easier to just get pissy and nasty and caca. But our study members don't demonstrate that.
Now, can you mention some of the examples of the before and after effects of sulfur with some of your participants?
Okay. I guess one of the startling things, we had 54 people who were scheduled to have open heart surgery, and every 54 cases were canceled. Their EKGs had gone back to normal.
Their EKGs went back to normal.
Normal.
What does sulfur do to reverse that?
It allows you to regenerate the cells,
wow,
including the neurological cells that tell the EKG your heart works. Electrocardiogram is just a volt ammeter. You're just running it across the circuits of the heart to see what's going on. If they're normal again, then don't track the chest. I've been in far more chests than I really want to remember.
Because you used to take pictures?
No, I ran the OR.
You ran the OR, okay.
I ran the OR.
Did a lot of the people who visited your OR could have prevented the operation by using sulfur?
Oh yeah, we did every kind of operations, but I would still say for the most part, yes. The reason that people have surgery is one, and this you're going to hate this, they like the anesthetics. Oh, it really is criminal, but that's true. But the other is they've got pain, and the pain is too excruciating. They can't deal with it anymore. In 1971, they wanted to replace both of my knees. The pain wasn't that bad, so I said no. But I couldn't pick a $100 bill up off the ground. I was immobilized. But, and I knew the guy who got the first knees. He got both of them at one time. His knees were so bad they replaced both at one time with experimental things that a friend of mine had designed. And he did just fine. It gave him a new lease on life. If you don't have a boil on your ass or an infection in your testicles, you may not go out and cause war.
But, you don't have to go that far. How many people work out and all of a sudden stop working out or stop jogging and they become depressed because the oxygen is not getting through their blood and their system and their endorphins are not kicking in? Wasn't it Warburg who said that deprive a cell 35% of its oxygen for 48 hours and it may become cancerous?
Well, it'll become anaerobic. By definition, it becomes anaerobic. And anaerobic is the true definition of cancer.
Right.
If you've got cellular metabolism that is being happening without oxygen, it's by definition anaerobic. And you're going to make two daughter cells who are nasty, nasty stepsisters. This is such a simple process. When you were conceived, the job of your health became within you. How you changed is what you put in your mouth, what you saw with your eyes, what you breathed with your nostrils. Everything else is within you. And if it gets trapped within you and you stop pooping, now you got a problem. So now you're going to become really toxic. And I don't know how we would really judge toxicity of our study members, but we would have to judge from their voices, and what their photographs show is they're not very toxic anymore.
It's no secret that we see these planes flying above us all the time, chemtrails. And it's proven already that, the aluminum, barium, strontium, and other, heavy metals. Can sulfur help detoxify the body of heavy metals?
The quick answer is yes. The little longer answer is this. Long time ago, when I first started studying sulfur, I found a reference to this simple fact. Sulfur can make 146 different compounds of 92 naturally occurring elements, actually 91, actually 90, because it can't form its own a compound with itself, and it's also incapable of forming a compound with iodine. Too much iron in your serum sulfates out. Too much gold in your serum sulfates out.
Now,
Too much platinum.
define the word sulfate for those who don't know.
Combination of an element plus sulfur is a sulfate.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's the real thing is pretty much documentable. In 1938, one of the researchers for one of the drug companies making a vaccine, who really believed in what he was doing, gave the vaccine to his son. That was the last thing he ever heard from his son. His son went lost in his own mind.
Was that the polio?
No, this was just a vaccine.
Okay.
It was actually like that, and I don't recall the article enough, but he wrote a very telling description of what all the symptoms of autism are. 1938. We didn't start really vaccinating until after the war. We brought back all this wonderful information about what we can do with vaccines in the war. We started vaccinating willy-nilly. Then polio came along, and Salk did his thing. And a guy said, polio is eradicated in the world. Really? Don't go to India.
That's right.
It's easy for someone to make a statement. We don't have opinions. All we have is the information we've learned from my study members who refuse to die and evidently refuse to get sicker and refuse to become nastier and refuse to be participants.
But you remember how polio all of a sudden exploded. It was because of the antibiotics. Antibiotics would kill even the good flora and the good stuff that's in our gut, and the beautiful semi-permeable digestive system would allow this stuff to go in, and that's when the polio vaccine came up.
Well, I don't, in spite of the fact that I lived through it and got the sugar cubes and all that stuff, I don't know enough about polio to be really, conversant about it. I only know that we've had people who had polio, recovered from the polio, as they got older, guess what? Came back. And the sulfur seems to mediate that as well. It's cells that are either regenerating healthy cells or they're regenerating anaerobic cells. Doesn't have to be cancer as far as what it's going to do, but it's an anaerobic cell that's not going to do the job it was designed to do. Should have been fired, but it's got seniority.
Well, then it's safe to say that it's not the germ or the bacteria or the virus or the, cancer cells. It's the terrain, the environment. If your environment is alkaline, if it has a lot of oxygen, then it won't allow the cell to be intruded or invaded. Am I right in saying that?
If the terrain is inhospitable,
correct,
then it's inhospitable. Now that's to parasites, but even in the sense of a virus, which doesn't give a damn, if there's too much oxygen around, it has to go dormant because it's looking for anaerobic stuff. That's what vaccines do. Viruses do. They go around looking for anaerobic stuff. They tear into the cell, make a whole bunch more, finger-dingers to go and cause more trouble and more trouble and more trouble. The unfortunate part is if your body's so unhealthy, they tear the whole thing up, you die. We haven't lost anybody in 15 years. I hope that's not considered a testimonial.
So we've been talking a lot about cancer, but how about other conditions, say arthritis?
Oh, let's go to depression.
Okay,
because
great.
You mentioned it earlier.
Yes.
On the John Daly Show, October 10, I believe, 2010, he had a guest on from Harvard. His name was Tal Ben-Shahar, Israeli-trained PhD who was a Harvard fellow teaching a class on happiness. And so, Jon Stewart, he's a reasonable and funny man, said, well, what is this depression? And Tal Ben-Shahar adjusted his glasses and crossed his legs. And he said, depression is a lack of sulfur. And I've been trying to find out who told him since then, because that's exactly what the situation is. We don't have anybody on SSRIs. We don't have anybody depressed. You can't be depressed if you can get oxygen to your memories, because what you remember is the good stuff. You don't remember the bad stuff. Oh, my dad used to play with me. Well, who gives a crap? You remember the good stuff. You remember the stuff that makes you smile. You remember the stuff that makes you laugh.
Well, that's why I said, the people who stop working out or jogging or what have you, and they become depressed because the level of oxygen goes down. Isn't it the same? For example, you get into an accident, the first thing they put in your mouth is an oxygen mask to start helping you with,
okay, but that's a different, it really is a different oxygen. It's an oxygen that undergoes the transfer in the lung sacs, and there doesn't really need to be a lot of sulfur there, even though I'll tell you a little story about that. And and so it's like a car. You have to have fuel and you have to have oxygen, and then it burns and the car moves. Same thing in your body. Air goes in in the intake for your engine, goes to your lungs, ends up going all over in your blood, and that oxygen drives the machine. But the thing that repairs the machine is your lymph, the ocean within you. And that requires water. Water is much more important than sulfur. You can survive a lot longer if you had just sulfur or just water. You'd die if all you did was take the sulfur. Where the water, you could sustain life. You may not regenerate your cells, but you'll sustain life.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that got pretty heavy.
Well, depression is so rampant these days, and the answer is always the same. I mean, how many people used to go to the psychologist, psychiatrist in the 70s, maybe even the 80s, and they would go through talk therapy. Now, the talk therapy is to know, hey, how is the medication working? Oh, okay, let me just increase the dose right now. So that's the answer for everything. There's always a pill or a scalpel. That's about it.
Well, except for one thing. God didn't use a pill or a scalpel to make us.
That's right.
He used the dirt. It doesn't matter what you believe or what background you have. Every culture begins with the dirt. Biblically, the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground. Polynesians, the dust of the ground. The Chinese, the dust of the ground. It's sort of a fact that we try to ignore because we would rather control the dust of the ground than have to accept that we're dirt.
What about I'm just thinking of the most, I hate to use the word popular, most prevalent conditions. We have cancer, we have depression. How about heart?
Well, we covered that. We've had no one have a heart attack. We've had no one die. We haven't had anybody have a stroke, and we've had a number of people who've recovered from strokes.
Okay. How about arthritis?
Oh, that's not allowed. One, the pain goes away, and then your motility returns, and then you start chasing mama, and now we've got real problems. I'm serious. People who start taking sulfur and then say, well, this is great, and I don't need it anymore because it's a remedy, they're the ones who call back in about 4 days because the pain came back. What
about the finger joints that are crooked? Can it straighten them?
Oh, how about the golf ball finger joints? They get back down to normal size, yeah. It's inflammation.
Right.
It's all about inflammation. And if you can get the fluid, the extracellular fluid back in the cells, you don't have inflammation anymore.
See the same thing with osteoarthritis and osteoporosis?
Oh, Cindy was a -1, and now she's a +1.
Now, what does that mean?
Her bone scan was a -1. They wanted to give her Fosamax and all kinds of stuff because she was going to break her bones. And now she's a +1, and she proved it at Thanksgiving because she fell right on her ass on a tile floor and didn't break nothing. She went 4 feet in the air. I watched the whole thing. I thought, oh, God. And she laid there for a minute, and then she realized nothing was broken, and she said, thanks, sulfur.
It works. It works.
Yeah, it does. Before the Industrial Revolution, before men got so smart that they could defy God, before we sent the Beagle off to the Galapagos, whatever they call that place.
The Galapagos.
Yeah, I've never been able to say that. It's a Freudian problem. And none of our study members who've been on hardcore psychotics under the guise of their favorite psychiatrist are there anymore. And they don't have to ask their psychiatrist permission. They just get up in the morning and feel so damn good they don't take the pills.
And this is huge. This is if you look at all the emotional disease that we're plagued today. And, to that you can add epigenetic issues, you can add the economy, you can add, we're always at the brink of war or the dollar is going to collapse. There's so much fear out there. And believe me, in the other show we discuss a lot of this, but we do it because we want to inform people, not to spread the fear. But we have to live in awareness, not in fear. How about diabetes? I believe you mentioned that as well.
Diabetes is, you are what you eat, and sulfur reduces your blood sugars by 20% and allows you to regenerate your nerves so you don't have a numb penis and a numb foot and a numb hands. But it really is, the person has to take hold of their diet and get it straight. Cinnamon bark, from the trees in Ceylon, not from the McKesson's Isle, does the same thing. In a study of 45,000 people in 2005, everybody's blood sugar went down 20%. 20%, 40%, most people are off meds on that. We don't tell anybody to stop taking meds. Their doctors do.
Of course. The doctors do.
Yeah, of course. You'll get sued if someone goes into a coma and you've got them on a whole bunch of oral meds.
Have you had any of your participants talk to their doctors, telling them that they're getting better because of sulfur? Oh, no. Why would I hold it? One, why would I want to pick a fight? And two, part of my history was I spent 7 years training doctors. They didn't listen then. They won't listen now. The reason why I ask all the time, I ask pretty much every single guest about this, people who all of a sudden have their cancer gone, healed. I'm always curious to know if they go back to their oncologist and tell them, hey, this is what I did and my cancer is gone. We have so many reality TV shows. I wish there was one that videoed the people going to their doctors, because I want to see their doctor's face. And believe me, I'm not demonizing medical doctors. Oh, no, because I don't think it's their fault. They just have a toolbox provided to them by Big Pharma and their medical school. Yeah, but I believe it's easier to change the habits of the populace than it is to change the opinions of the 1%. And that will change the opinions of the medical profession. Either or that, or they go broke. I mean, if you're in a world of business, you'd sort of address this as business. We know that we have hurt the receipts of pharma. We know that because they complained about it, and they didn't, specifically point us out. But when you add up all the drugs these people aren't taking anymore, it was back in 2010. It was about 40 million, and the complaint was about 60 billion. They were complaining that they were short 60 billion. Now, back then, we really probably didn't even have 100,000 people in the study, and we still could account for $40 million. It's just business, Mel. A smart businessman will understand the trends. A stupid man will go by his opinions. Definitely. And I think a big problem of all of this is, people who are listening to us, they're open-minded. They here's the problem too. I speak to so many doctors who are alternative practitioners. Some of them are MDs, but they become NDs also because they're open-minded enough. They tell me the same thing. Probably about 90% of the clients or patients that go to see them, they see them because they have run out of luck. They're at the end of the rope. They're dying and they cannot find a solution. I wish more people would take action before that happened, became more proactive as opposed to being reactive.
Well, okay, now, and I don't want to give people an out, but, Constantine didn't get baptized and didn't become a Christian until he was on his deathbed.
That's right.
I think our study members, if they would sort of get on the bandwagon before that point in time, then they have a better chance of being able to cancel the linen selections for their casket.
Well,
I mean, I have gotten a call from a mortuary in Louisiana, and he's pissed at me because she picked out those linens a year ago, and she ain't dead.
Well, you see, when you say that, I'm thinking of I lost my train of thought now because you gave me some humor there with the casket. Go on, the thought will come back.
Well, the commerce is, our current commerce is designed for us to be sick and get really nasty and die. Even the morticians. Everyone has a plan now. You want to be ready for it. You want to be able to, want to know what you're going to be in when you die. You want to know what the casket's going to look like. What does it smell like? I mean, that's a big business. I mean, we've got that sort of big business here in town.
Well, what I meant to say was there are no atheists in a foxhole. People who run out of alternatives. I hope that a friend of mine's not listening to this show today, but months ago, I posted a show that I did with Dr. Brzezinski. You know who he is.
Yeah.
And I posted it on my personal Facebook account, and he came back to me and he complained that Dr. Brzezinski was charging for his services and he was too expensive. And I explained to him, look, the reason why he has to charge is because insurance companies cannot pay him. And he still has to buy the same pharmaceuticals your oncologist has to buy. So they demonized him because he has to charge. Because he cannot charge. If he cannot charge, he's going to go under.
Yeah.
So there you have it. People who take what Western medicine tells them as the truth, they need to step outside the box. Look at my friend Ty Bollinger. He loves his father, his mother, pretty much a lot of his family until he got outside of the box. And now he's healthy and his whole family is healthy and they're listening to him. Why? Because finally he found the answers.
Because someone showed them. We're all from Missouri. We all are from Missouri. And, and the people who are really hardcore from Missouri, I said, well, you show us.
Show me state, right?
Yeah, you want me to show you? No, you show me. I know what it'll do. You have to show me that you understand what it'll do. And that really does separate the boys from the girls.
Yeah.
And it's what's surprising to me is that this is a biological process that really takes 7 years, but the way that the people respond is just amazing. I call people and they'll say, I just can't believe this. And I said, believe it. Now tell someone else.
Well, at that point, you're not believing it. You know it.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I've known it for a long time. And, what I've come to the realization is I'm dehydrated. Good God, I've been measuring, and I'm off by 20 ounces a day.
How about skin conditions? People with acne, psoriasis, rosacea, toenail fungus, burns, liver spots. Can this help?
Organic sulfur makes girls beautiful, no matter their age. All of those things you mentioned are a concern to girls. Boys don't give a shit. Pardon my French. They really don't. A rash on your face, that means you're a real man. No, it doesn't. It means your biology's all screwed up. And, when we have 50-year-olds whose acne finally goes away, and we've got 16-year-olds whose acne finally goes away, oh, my goodness, it could be we're dealing with inflammation. Inflammation where? In the liver.
Mm.
We have 8 men who will not die of liver failure because their liver's working again. Hep C did not kill them.
Hepatitis C?
Yeah.
That's a death sentence to most people.
Unless you take sulfur, and then we can't. We've tried. God, we've tried to kill them.
How about children? See, this ADD, ADHD, hyperactivity, depression. Well, we already discussed depression, mood swings. But all these children that are given Ritalin and so many ADD medication, can this address their what they call a disorder.
Yeah, if I get a chance to talk to the mothers alone, quietly in a bedroom, because, it's them who've caused these kids to be on Ritalin. I interviewed 480 inmates at the Salt Lake County Detention Center with the aid of the guards, and asked them only one question: what was your first drug? What was their first drug, Mel?
Ritalin?
You got it. And often before the age of 6, they just wouldn't behave to go to kindergarten. Doctors would give them Ritalin. They'll behave. They'll behave. They'll become zombies.
Mm-hmm.
And then they become convicts, and then they become guards. God, and then they become politicians. Oh, no. We don't have to really take advantage of all the jobs we've got. We don't need to be guards. We don't need to be police. We don't need to be warriors. We don't need to be Army, Navy, all that other stuff. If we can just communicate, you're of the age that you would know this. Steve McQueen was Cool Hand Luke. And one of the scenes from Cool Hand Luke has Steve McQueen just shit-faced with a hacksaw in his hand and 24 parking meters cut right off. And Strother Martin turns and says, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And all of the problems we have in the world are a failure to communicate, including those of our cells' ability to communicate with each other. And that's what sulfur does.
How about glutathione? Is there a link between the absence of this or the body's ability to produce it and NADD, ADHD? And can sulfur help with that?
Yeah, because glutathione is a sulfur-based amino acid. You go to the biology books and say, well, here we've got methionine and cysteine. Well, if you don't have sulfur, you don't have those two. And if you don't have those two, then you don't have taurine, you don't have lysine, you don't have valine. And as you make the chains longer, you get up to glutathione, the repair molecule. And then you go a little higher, you get up to endorphins, that thing that makes you, get all goosebumpy and laugh.
Yeah.
But if you go just a little higher, you get into B17. Wow, Laetrile. You make your own.
So the absence of sulfur prevents the body from producing glutathione and the rest?
And Laetrile and, Adam Bergstrom, when he's on our show, he says, well, without sulfur, you can't get pregnant. Without sulfur, the sperm can't penetrate the ovum.
Mm.
Without sulfur, you probably don't poop too good.
How about, and I don't mean to go back for cancer for a second, but I've heard that...
come on, it's your sandbox.
Cancer, women with lung cancer, women who have never smoked, we're seeing a huge increase in lung cancer. Why is that?
Because they're breathing the air.
Yeah.
And they don't have anything to take the trash out of the air sacs and, send it to the toilet.
But why women and not men if we're breathing the same air?
Actually, I think if you do a little research, you'll find that it's
everybody,
both men and women. Yeah, it's just women are, a good target. They can become fearful and they'll become better buyers. This is all about marketing.
How about allergies? How about allergies? Asthma, emphysema. So many people with allergies these days.
Well, I would have allergies too if I had to breathe what everyone else is breathing. Hess Goldstein is our Hawaiian study director. He's 74 years old. He'd had asthma since he got a vaccine when he was 6 years old in New Jersey. He had the asthma when he moved to Colorado. He had the asthma when he moved to New Zealand. He had the asthma when he moved to Hawaii because it was downwind from Kilauea. Mm-hmm. And after having me on his radio show and taking sulfur a while, he sort of didn't go back to get any inhalers.
But that's what I mean. Can sulfur help with asthma and allergies?
Yeah, it's a repair job.
Mm.
You're allowing the cells to regenerate. The cells that have been scarred because of the crap are regenerated. I should have asked Hess if he actually had his lungs tattooed. That's a bad thing to do, but some people do it.
How about glaucoma? Eyes?
Oh, eyes is, that's my background. We've not had anybody increase their intraocular pressures once they started taking sulfur internally and spraying sulfur water in their eyes.
Now explain that. How do you do that? How do you actually put the sulfur in your eyes? You mix it with water?
Tap water. Hot tap water works fine.
Hot tap water.
One teaspoon of sulfur, 4 ounces of hot tap water, much cleaner than all the swimming pools that all of our Olympic champions have had to swim in. And you spray it in your eyes anytime you want. If you wear mascara, it's going to get really runny and caca. So you can just use it as an eye drop. But it's more effective as a spray because you get enough sulfur water, and the sulfur transports the oxygen across the avascular cells of the cornea.
Will it hurt?
First time it stings just a little bit.
Okay, so just no more than ocean water.
Actually, similar to the first splash of ocean water. I think it's all about pH, but I'm not sure.
Right.
But one of my dearest friends, the brother of my first flame in the second grade, and I know she's not listening, so Mary Anderson was my first love. Second grade, the little blonde girl in the back. I just fell gaga. It's ridiculous. So, but he's remained my oldest friend. And son of a gun, he, turns up with glaucoma, and it was like pulling teeth to get him to take the sulfur. Then it was like pulling teeth to get him to use the drops. And his doctors have no idea why his glaucoma has not advanced. They have no idea why his visual field has improved. And he finally trusted them enough to take his lenses out, and if he would have waited a little longer, the lenses would have cleared on their own. I have gotten calls from ophthalmologists who were a little irritated because for some reason the cataract they were planning to take out was gone.
Now explain that. How can the cataract?
Who made the cataract? Who made the cataract? You did. And this is one of these little medical facts you don't even hear on Jeopardy. There's an artery that goes from the optic nerve to the lens capsule, which is where the lens lives, which later becomes the cataract. And around the age of 40, it stops being patent, and so no oxygen gets to the lens capsule, and the lens itself starts to crack and get weird and funny, and that's a cataract. When the hyaloid artery opens up again, the lens clears. It becomes perfectly clear again. You made it. You can fix it.
And how about for those of us who are lucky enough to have hair? But
now you want to get personal, don't you?
Yeah. Well, you know what they say. They have a saying that God, what is it? Those with imperfect heads, they put hair, and the rest, they left them bald, right?
I'm looking at, I have a little mirror up behind the computer, and I'm looking at the top of my head. And I wrestled 64 Olympics and, for a total of 9 years. And because of that, I really wore my hair off quite early in life. Mm-hmm. And now I'm growing hair on top of this perfectly bald head.
How about
go ahead. The thing that your listeners want to listen to, especially those who are diabetic, your hair stops falling out.
What about the color of the hair turning gray? What about the color of the hair turning gray?
Hair color is interesting, but it's just a matter of, are the hair follicles working? Are you getting oxygen into the hair follicles? Because just at the tail end of the hair follicle is a thing called a pigment follicle.
Right.
And the pigment goes down the center of the hair. Now, unless I'm mistaken, you have dark hair.
Well, some parts are dark, but, I get some help, but in reality, I'm gray.
Okay, all right. Well, so at the nape of your neck, where you don't really, address the gray too rapidly, you'll see hair color return, and the texture of your hair will improve.
So it reverses the
No, it gets oxygen to the cells that haven't been doing their job. And, and generally the oxygen comes in one oxygen molecule, another oxygen molecule. One's a good cop, the other one's a bad cop. And after a short period of time, you're back on track.
What about using, for example, I heard somebody the other day told me, hey, throw away all your shampoos and conditioners and use baking soda on your hair, and then as a conditioner use organic apple cider vinegar. Would it be better to spray the sulfur with water on the hair?
No, because you're making the hair from the inside.
Right, but I'm talking about rubbing it, around the head. Would that be helpful?
I don't have enough information to even be valuable in that part.
Okay.
It's what we see, and we see this with women who buy a lot of anti-wrinkle creams, or did. You make the wrinkles go away by hydrating the cells of your endothelial layer.
Inside, as opposed to spraying it on their faces.
Yeah, outside's what a waste of time.
Yeah.
The only thing that you should be doing outside is kissing.
So it's a waste of money. All the women that spend billions of dollars every year.
And it's so here's the economic doom. The pharmaceutical industry is going to go south, and then the cosmetics industry is going to go south, but milady's breasts aren't going to go south. If you allow the cells of your body to reconnect, the parts of your body that are hanging down in inappropriate places, stop doing that. When
you're talking about the gravity taking its course to women especially, I heard that wearing a bra is actually not recommended and that it's unhealthy. Have you read that?
Have you ever looked down a woman's blouse?
If I told you, my wife would say, "What are you doing, Mel?" But of course I have.
Exactly. Okay. So when I was in the automobile business, I had two customers that I helped them get rid of an old Benz, and we put them in a Mazda, et cetera, et cetera. And while we were signing the papers, I couldn't help but notice I was looking down her neck. Okay. And what would surprise me, she was 87. She didn't have a bra on, but she had breasts. And she didn't have any knickers on, and she sort of looked like a 30-year-old girl under this funny dress. She was a dancer, had never worn a bra, and she and her husband were just as vibrant and as happy about life as you could ever imagine. That was the first indication to me that age has absolutely nothing to do with chronological years.
No. I agree.
And, but I grew up looking down necks. I'm sorry. I don't look down boys' necks, but girls I do. And when you see the changes of age, the crepey neck, well, the crepey neck goes away.
What is the reason for the crepey neck again? Dehydration. And not all water is made equal.
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, you've got Republican water, Democratic water, liberal water. And, it just has to be water that your body can utilize.
How about teeth and gums? Teeth and gums. Can it help?
Oh, yeah. Brush your teeth with sulfur twice a day, and you probably lose your dentist phone number. It makes gingivitis go away.
Why is that? Because it's killing the bacteria? Because of the oxygen?
No, it's transporting oxygen across the capillary network of the gums.
Right.
And how do we know that? Because a little girl from Massachusetts called and said, I was brushing my teeth with sulfur and looking out the window and the day got brighter. Oxygen to the brain. Well, how did it get there?
And a lot of the sulfur, it addresses pain, which is probably the most common over-the-counter thing that people buy at the drugstore. You have ibuprofen and all of that. 55% and 24% increased risk of heart attack, respectively, for people who take that often. I didn't know that.
Unfortunately, it's true. And my son-in-law is blind and in a wheelchair, 2 different Camaro accidents. And he's no longer taking any opiates, 0. And can feel the bottoms of his feet and says he can see gray. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, time will tell. That's the interesting thing about biology. Time will tell.
How about ulcers?
Oh, not even allowed. Boy, if you still have problems with ulcers after, 2 weeks, we send the dwarfs to your door to beat you on the shins with little baseball bats.
So ulcers, it can... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's repairing the cells of the stomach that have been ulcerated. I'll give you the best example. Steve Reeves died of a bed sore.
Yes.
Everything was working, but he died of sepsis.
Sepsis.
And an old friend of mine went in to see his mom after she had open heart surgery, and he said something smells funny, and she said, "Oh, it's this thing on my butt." He said, "Show me." She said, "You've never seen my butt." He said, "Show me." And she had a decubitus bed sore about the size of a lemon. So he ran home, mixes up sulfur and baking soda in a paste, goes back and slaps it on her butt. The next day, it's gone.
Wait a second. You can mix sulfur with baking soda?
Yeah.
With what? With water?
Yeah.
Okay. How much of each? One
to one.
1 to 1.
1 teaspoon of each. Tablespoon
and
of each.
Water?
And
how much water?
Yeah.
Tablespoon of water.
You're making a paste.
So in open sores, that can help.
Oh, yeah, but the thing that's really wonderful in open sores is just pure pine pitch.
Now, what is that?
The pitch of a pine tree.
Okay.
In Lawrence, Kansas, there was a wound care nurse named Les Raymond who became a cardiovascular nurse in another city at a hospital. And she didn't lose a single limb to gangrene by pouring pine pitch into the wound.
Huh. I know somebody who has open wounds, and they're thinking about cutting his legs, so I'm going to let him know about this.
Oh, no. So, caca.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get a hold of her, but she would be adamant. I mean, in the doctor's request her, she had to run the whole state. She never lost a limb, a digit, a nose, a penis, anything to gangrene.
And who can take organic sulfur?
If you can't take organic sulfur, you're already dead.
So everyone can?
Yeah. There is no sulfur in sulfa. Synthetic antibiotics are not sulfur. They're sulfonamides. The Germans had to come up. Yeah, the Germans had to come up with those because they bombed the penicillin plant in France. Dumb.
And do you have to take more water than usual when you're taking sulfur?
Yeah, you have to supply enough water for your body to utilize it, and that's half of your body weight in water. That's actually less than what is. If you want to think about a total turnaround, you got 75% of your body total is water. Okay, you're not turning it around every day because it's being utilized, but you have to have enough to provide the oxygen to allow your cells to repair and regenerate.
And Patrick, one last question before I forget, to remind the listeners, what is the best way to take organic sulfur, how often, and when?
The best time to take sulfur is on a 12-hour cycle. It's a 12-hour cycle in and of itself. Every 12 hours, sulfur leaves your body. So first thing in the morning, 12 hours later. If you forget, right before you go to sleep, not right before you go to bed. Some people can't take sulfur within 4 or 5 hours of going to sleep because they won't go to sleep. But if you do it on a 12-hour cycle, you'll get to that point. But if you forget, right before you go to sleep. I just talked to a lady who was who's been taking sulfur for a while. I said, "Are you brushing your teeth with sulfur?" She said, "I don't need it." I said, "I didn't ask you if you needed it." I said, "Are you doing it?" We have 30 dentists in our study who are only in our study because their clients, their patients, came into their office with regenerated gums from brushing their teeth with a soft bristle toothbrush and sulfur twice a day.
But that's not good for their business, isn't it?
It must be. They're selling sulfur.
Oh, good. But what do you mean when you say take it before going to sleep? Is this when you're falling asleep? Is it because you're going to experience lucid dreaming? Is it because your oxygen and your energy will be going into regeneration as opposed to keeping you energized for work, for example?
Exactly. We had students at the University of Utah who stayed up 3 days straight, no sleep, on sulfur, did fine, did great on the test, and slept like babies when they were done.
We can force ourselves to go without sleep, or we can encourage ourselves to not go to sleep by continually flooding our body, our active body, with oxygen. When you know you're going to go into la-la land, the sulfur hurries you into that aspect of dreaming, and you can't regenerate any of your cells unless you're dreaming. But if you forget, that's the way you do it. I don't ever get a chance to remember because the phone keeps ringing. So it's time for me to go to bed. I put a teaspoon of sulfur in my mouth, start chewing it, and by the time my head hits the pillow, I'm asleep.
Great. So those people who are listening to us, they may be wondering, all right, this is very expensive. Well, it's not expensive. You go to our website, godsulfur.com, or you can go to our website and see it there. Anybody who wants to start, let's say they get their 2 jars of sulfur. What should they expect the first moment they take that tablespoon? And again, if you have a condition, please don't expect that it's going to change in 24 hours. Give it some time, right?
Well, no, and if it does change in 24 hours, please let us know, because it has happened.
Oh, okay. I'm just setting the expectations. Somebody who takes something last night, then calls and says, hey, I'm not feeling any different than before.
The reason that it's 2 pounds is for most people who have been hornswoggled by the 1%, it takes them at least 6 weeks to understand the benefits. It takes them at least 6 weeks to get a comment from a friend who's known them for one day. They want to know where they get the glow.
That's right.
And it makes a lot more sense to take sulfur with someone else so you can see if you can kill them off as well. But in the meantime, you see the changes. Right. You see hair color changes. You see changes around the eyes. You see changes in attitudes. And this you see really pretty rapidly. Because that's how your body responds. If your body is sort of, if someone's giving your body a little bit of coaxing, your body doesn't make your life miserable. You don't become Genghis Khan. You don't become Adolf Hitler. You don't become Joseph Stalin. They all had boils on their butts.
All I'm seeing, Patrick, is the culprit here is the lack of oxygen that has happened for the past 100 years or more. And I think this is why we're seeing so many disease, so many conditions, so much depression, so much cancer, so much of everything. So oxygen is the key. And you need a mechanism to take that oxygen to your cell, and that is sulfur. Well,
you've actually said that very eloquently. Can I use that?
Of course you can. I learned it from you. Patrick, any final comments you want to tell the world?
If sulfur doesn't resonate with you, could it resonate with your parents? Could it resonate with your children? Could it resonate with the children who don't know you care? Autistic kids don't care that you care. They don't know anything. And, if we come to the plate for any reason at all, it's because that's unkind. You just don't go in and you take a child and the teddy bear and leave the mom with just the teddy bear, and they call it a child. That's cruel. And, we don't have to cause a world war to change that. We just address those kids who've been damaged, the parents who've been damaged, the people you love most. So, if it doesn't resonate with you, consider them.
Excellent. Well, this is a great interview, Patrick. Thank you so much for what you're doing, for your study. And I'm so glad that you and I made contact, because I know that we're going to learn a lot, and we're going to do this at a grassroots level. This is the way real transformation is going to happen. We're going to change and shatter the paradigm doing it this way. Thank you so much for being part of Sanitas.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was Patrick McGeehan discussing sulfur, the missing link for a healthy life. Now you know why there has been a concerted effort to remove sulfur from our lives, causing many health conditions to increase. Oxygen seems to be the key. And to derive the benefits from organic sulfur, go to getsulfur.com, which is also linked on our website, and you can buy it right there. As you know, I don't recommend or endorse any product unless I try it. And organic sulfur has to be one of those products that has made a clear and marked difference. And I want you to experience the same. And once you do, please email me and let me know. I'm very anxious and excited to hear about your findings. And all of this thanks to you, Sanitas member. You are the ones who make our healthy journey a reality. I also want to say a special thanks to Josie, or Yoko, on our forum. She was the very first person to recommend Patrick McGeehan and sulfur. And I'll leave you with a quote by Albert Einstein. Strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. Thanks for listening. I'm Mel Fabregas. Until next week, be well, and remember that your health and longevity should not be classified information.